Aloha! Welcome to another episode of Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm your host, Carl Campagna. Many people believe that education can be the silver bullet or the linchpin that can help solve problems like homelessness, drug addiction, social division, and income inequality. And in Hawaii, of all places, where our many intertwined cultures all cherish our keiki and do all we can to open doors for their successes, we assume that a high priority is placed on having a world-class educational system. But is it? On this show, we talk about the programs available to our keiki, the quality of our facilities and infrastructure, addressing deferred maintenance, increasing the number of cool rooms for our keiki and teachers, a more comprehensive curriculum approach, as well as appropriately recognizing and valuing our teachers and administrative staff. And perhaps most importantly, what life and career opportunities are we providing for our keiki to thrive today and tomorrow? The Hawaii Children's Action Network mission is to build a unified voice for educating and advocating for Hawaii's children. Many successful initiatives have passed over the past 15 years, including the P3 initiative, with a goal to have all third graders reading at grade level by 2015. The Vote Yes on 4 campaign to allow public funds to support early childhood education, and much, much more. Today, we are fortunate to have Ms. Angelina Mercado, Director of Advancement for the Hawaii Children's Action Network. Join us as we learn who, what, where, and how, and of course, the when is now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know it was a little last minute, so that flexibility is much appreciated. So,
you're welcome.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from, and what got you here?
I'm originally from New York City. I was working in the financial sector and decided I needed a really big change in my life. And I was making my way across the country looking at where could that next place be. I had a cousin living here at the time who said, all right, just put your stuff in storage, come on over. 2 months later, I decided, all right, I think this is the place that I need to be. And went back to New York, packed up my stuff, sold, gave away what I could, and made my way back to Hawaii, originally to make chocolate, and realized that there was so much more that I could use my finance skills and my life's work and my life's experiences with, and I just kept asking myself, what could I do? Where could I contribute more to the local community here in Hawaii? Then I found myself in the nonprofit sector.
There's been a request that we back up to chocolate for a moment.
Okay.
What do you mean by chocolate? You're making chocolate?
Yes.
What's that?
So, one of the things that I did in exploring my passions when I was working in finance was to take a lot of culinary classes in baking and chocolate making, and I decided that that was one of the passions that I really wanted to explore early on, and I could not go on with the rest of my life and not exploring the things that I thought was really either going to make a difference in the world or that were really going to make me happy. And
chocolate is the centerpiece.
And who doesn't love chocolate, right? I don't think anybody out there, if you do, there's more chocolate in the world for others.
For me.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, that's excellent. So, all right. So you've made it to Hawaii.
Yes.
And so you're applying your financial background with the Hawaii Children's Action Network.
Yes.
So what's your position?
So I'm the Director of Advancement.
And what do you do as Director of Advancement?
And as the Director of Advancement, I look at it as we're advancing our mission in the community. And that means, how do we get people involved in the things that we do? How do we educate them about the status of children in Hawaii? And by them, I mean lawmakers, the business community, as well as the average everyday citizen who is on the ground affected by any changes that we make with respect to children's policies. And inside of that, how do we make sure that our business community and our legislators are raising and spending the money appropriately? That's where our advocacy work comes in. And inside of my work in the organization, where do we get the money to support our operations to make sure that we are either working with our legislators or the watchdogs, depending on the day, and how that goes?
Yeah. What I appreciate is children have a very small voice, if any voice at all, when it comes to community and specifically public policy. So there aren't enough organizations, as far as I'm concerned, that do the work that you do. So I'm appreciative of that. Being a father myself, having kids of various ages, I see what the challenges are for a number of different families. So I appreciate that. Especially the advocacy thing, knowing that there's a group that's showing up to talk with our legislators to help create policy that can do what this show begins to talk about, right? Which is advancing the future, helping our children thrive, and finding as many ways as possible. How long have you been? Let's start there. How long have you been with this position, with the Hawaii Children's Action Network?
I've been with Hawaii Children's Action Network since September last year, so not quite a year yet.
Not quite a year, okay.
And I want to get back to your point about children and their voices.
Yes.
We believe that everybody has a voice, and our role in the community is to amplify that voice. Even children have voices.
Yes, they do.
And as a parent, I'm sure you know that very well.
And when their voice isn't heard, ours is.
Yes.
As parents.
Exactly.
So that's where, if we look at everything, this little philosophy for a minute, I guess, from me. If we look at everything from the perspective of family, we realize that community is family.
Exactly.
So one child is saying something, and perhaps as we get older, as we develop into our own psychologies and philosophies of life, we begin to realize that my self-identity isn't just me. My self-identity is my community as well. So yes, it's my kids, it's my wife, it's my friends, it's my neighbors, it's my community, it's the policy that is driven as a result of what our communities need. And when our children have a need, there must be, it is necessary that people stand up and bring that attention, shine that light, and make sure those conversations are happening where impact can be had. And so that's one of the things that you do. The advocacy side is you bring the ideas to the legislators, to state legislators or to federal legislators, or both? Both,
actually. So we work very closely on the state and local level, but we're also part of an organization of other state organizations that work on children's issues and policies. So we're part of that consortium, and we're part of that group of thinking about what are the policies that need to be moved on the national level. Because often what will happen is sometimes a lot of the work will start on the local level, on a state level, and that'll cause federal changes across the board. So let's say 28 states are implementing some sort of program. Well, then the federal, from the federal government standpoint, they'll come and sort of clean it up and make sure that it becomes a national rule or regulation. So it works both ways. Part of what our work is to understand where we do make the most impact. Do we need to start at the national level and make sure that a state like Hawaii is implementing national changes, or do we do grassroots efforts here and where they model in the example that starts to cause a national change?
It would seem most effective to do both.
And we do.
Excellent, excellent. So, okay, what makes Hawaii Children's Action Network unique of the other organizations that exist?
Sure. What makes us really unique is that, you've mentioned earlier in your introduction the work that we've done, the P3 program, for instance. That's something that we did earlier in our organization's history. We were actually closer, we were sort of quasi-governmental, we were attached to the executive office in the state. And so we did a lot of work on the standards, implementing standards in education, and we had really close ties to the government. So we know how the government works, right? So we know how the executive branch works, we know how the legislature works. And we're also, from a historical perspective and from a staffing perspective, we're on the inside of where the trends are moving and what are the standards that we need to implement. And in our most recent history with our CON-AM and our Be My Voice Hawaii campaign, we've started to grow a really strong advocacy base and knowledge base. And we're really good at building coalitions, which is what we see that the community needs locally. And
yeah, I think that's an important point, because too often people work in silos,
Exactly.
and we don't realize that we're doubling up and tripling and quadrupling up on work sometimes.
Exactly.
So if we get all of the groups and entities working together more, realizing, sharing what they're doing, sharing their data, sharing what they have learned over the years, there's greater opportunity to be more impactful.
And that's actually a need that we've seen in the community with respect to advocacy. There are subject matter experts when it comes to children in the community, whether it's foster care, substance abuse, et cetera. But we've found that many organizations either don't know how to advocate, don't have time to advocate, or don't even know that they can be advocates for their missions and their causes. And we've been the subject matter expert in early learning and education, and we've developed that as well in our toolkit from an advocacy perspective. So how can we get the community together? How can we raise the voices and amplify the voices in our community and make a greater change faster? Because we need fast change.
We do. We need short-term and long-term change.
Yep.
Fortunately, we have Obama's new initiative, new act that came out, ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, which gives each state and the districts within opportunities to make, honestly, wholesale changes.
Right.
To the system, to the educational system, what is being done and how it's being done. Are you guys getting involved, or are you engaged in that conversation?
We are engaged in that conversation, and a part of how we're further engaging the community in that conversation is we have a program called our Community Champions membership program, where we gather the members of nonprofit colleagues in the community, and we help them advocate for their causes. And part of what we do is we make sure that we reach out to them and let them know that what the standards are. We do a thorough analysis and how it would apply to them. So that's a big part of what we're doing on the grassroots level in terms of disseminating information, helping people understand what's the impact on me, what could we potentially be doing in this state, as well as working with other organizations and agencies and thinking about what do we need from a macro level, from a high impact level in the state, and how do we apply that in a sustainable and really smart way.
Yeah, absolutely. We have, a couple of weeks ago, we had Mr. Darryl Galera on, and he's the head of the governor's ESSA team. There's 19 members of that team, and they had just really begun. He didn't have a whole lot to report, but he wanted to let us know what his hopes were, that what they were intending to do and how they were intending to do it. I know that they're inviting a number of people to be involved because they would like to have that community input. And that's one of the necessary pieces, that it isn't just someone saying, I want this to happen and now everyone's going to change this. That's actually how we got where we were. So that's where my hope was, that in the conversations within that committee, that organizations such as yours get to be at the table, advocating for the children from your perspective, because there's always going to be someone who has their agenda or has an agenda that may not always be the children's agenda.
Right.
So we need to make sure that you're at that table as much as can be. So do you have a seat at that table, or you just get to be advisory to it, or what is your connection to that group?
Actually, that's a really good question for our community engagement specialist, and I would have to defer to him in terms of what the most recent makeup of that table looks like.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. This is Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm your host, Carl Campagna, and today we have with us Miss Angie Mercado of the Hawaii Children's Action Network. See you in a minute. Thank you.
I'm Jay Fidel, and I'm the host of Research in Manoa, Mondays from 12 to 1 on thinktechhawaii.com. Take a look at us and learn about geophysics, learn about planetology, learn about the ocean and earth sciences at UH Manoa. You'll really enjoy it. So come around, we'll see you then.
Aloha, I'm Chantal Seville, the host of The Savvy Chick Show, which you can watch every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on thinktechhawaii.com. On The Savvy Chick Show, we are all about inspiring and empowering women and girls to be the best they can be by having amazing guests from all around the world. So we hope you'll join us every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Aloha!
Hello, and I'm Patrick Bratton. Please join me for Global Connections every Thursday at 1 p.m., where we talk with a variety of guests about various international issues, historical issues, both here in Hawaii and abroad, ranging from security, human rights, ethics, and all sorts of other things. So please join me. I look forward to talking with you and seeing some of my guests.
Welcome back to Think Tech Hawaii's Education, Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm your host, Carl Campagna. Once again, we have with us Ms. Angie Mercado from the Hawaii Children's Action Network. We're going to learn a little bit more from them right now. So, okay, let's have a conversation about the status of children.
Sure.
So, we have a question. We have a question. Let's see. Mark Ward. Angie, of all the areas that you could have applied your skills and experience, what spoke to you about children's advocacy?
Sure. So, the biggest thing about children's advocacy is I am the result of children's advocacy. I mentioned earlier, I'm originally from New York City, and I grew up in Section 8 housing. Okay. And, I was a participant in the Head Start program. I had dentists come into the schools and do preliminary dental screening. And I was in an enrichment program. And, from a grassroots level, I have very, now fond memories of my mother advocating for me to succeed as much as possible in school and use all the resources available to us. And that really spoke to me about the work that we do, right? It's about how do we provide services for low-income families? How do we empower families to advocate on behalf of their children?
Yeah, how do we balance it?
Right.
Because there are so many schools that have significant funding because of their community and neighborhoods compared to others that don't have that same level of affluence.
Right.
So there's not as much money from the community flowing into the school. So how do we balance that out? So you know what, first of all, thank you, Mark, for that question. That's a great question. And thank you for answering that very personal question about that. I think that's wonderful. I think you then become an example of how the system can work because of what you've been able to achieve and where you are. And then obviously that inspires you.
Yeah, it does.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Wonderful. No, thank you. I appreciate the question. We're always open to questions. We've had some phone calls. We've had some tweets and various other ways that we get information to us. So thank you. Please, by all means, call in or tweet in. We appreciate that. So, okay, let's go back to status of children a little bit.
Sure.
Tell us, as far as Hawaii is concerned, tell us about what you can about the socioeconomic variances.
Well, and you spoke about it, education is the silver bullet, right? How do we advance? How do we get everybody on equal footing? And if you didn't already know it out there, 85% of a child's brain develops by the time they're 5 years old. So early education and early intervention when necessary is super important. So where our children stand most recently is 51% of our 4-year-olds are not in preschool. They're not in a formal preschool setting. So they're not getting that early education.
That was 51%?
51% are not in preschool.
Wow.
So that's pretty big.
Yeah.
70% of our 4th graders are not reading at the 4th grade level. So, and now we're getting a little bit beyond the 5-year mark.
Sure.
So when our businesses are looking at what the workforce looks like and the education attained by even the high school graduates, it all starts early on.
Yes, it does.
And we are behind, yet making improvements slowly but surely.
Everything is incremental, but this
It
is where
is.
faster change would be better. The
Right.
hard part there is, how do you, yes, you had your initiative to get, to help support getting more public funding into preschool
Right.
opportunities, pre-K opportunities. We know that there was some success there. I think there's more that's needed.
Yes, it's $3 million so far funding the preschool program, and in about 18 schools, 365 students are served in that program.
Out of how many potential?
200,000.
See, 200,000 children
Right.
that can use this. And anyone who's a parent knows, when you begin, when you're teaching your children, you begin by, okay, this color, that color.
Right.
You begin by just comparative analysis of things. You say, okay, now that we're beginning to recognize colors and shapes a little bit, now let's recognize numbers and letters, and let's move along that way. And you try to get them to the point where they can start to identify words. And this is the whole process, right? Sometimes that takes a long time.
Right.
For some kids, longer than others. Well, one of the challenges, and so I want to get your thought on this, one of the challenges there is, yes, it's the money. We don't have the money to put our kids into a preschool situation, so we can't do that. So we're going to just keep them at home. Well, okay. But many of these children and many of these families are not primary English speakers. So how much of an impact, or of that 51% or then 49% who are not, or vice versa, how many of that are non-English speaking homes that are also not helping to prepare them for kindergarten because they're not speaking English or even Native Hawaiian here in Hawaii in preparation for school? I mean, how much of that is an impact? How much do you see that?
Well, I mean, the fact that our preschool program in the schools are really small will have a major impact on that population, because our Board of Education here is actual a dual language learning. It's classified as dual language learning. So that means that we recognize Native Hawaiian and English as our official languages. But I think what you're also getting to is a lot of other populations from the Pacific Islands where Hawaiian is not their language and their language is not being addressed.
Correct.
And so our numbers that we have does not have the breakdown of non-English speakers, but it's certainly something that's represented in more of the child care settings. There are the unofficial child care settings that a lot of our communities find themselves in.
Yes.
Right, where it may be auntie down the street may have like 20 kids in her house.
Which I can't imagine that, but exactly. So, but they're all 20 kids in the house and they're all speaking whatever language because
Right.
that's the community. And it makes perfect sense. The community that they know is taking care of themselves, is taking care of each other. But there could be more integration. There could be more support that reaches into those communities to be more engaged, to help the path.
Well, one of the programs that's really helpful in that sense is the Preschool Open Doors program.
Yes.
And so that program is actually a subsidy program for low-income families. And we were fortunate enough in this year to have won an increase in the funding for that program.
Yes.
So it was, status quo about $6 million every year that we fought in the budget to fund that program, and now there will be $10 million. So the extra $4 million will now serve approximately 1,600 students. And the more that we push the legislature to create funding so that families can now put their children in certified preschools, maybe they're not part of the Board of Education's pilot program yet, but there are still other preschools in the community that have the resources to work with children of multiple language homes, or who have, taken and implement proper preschool standards to prepare their children for kindergarten. So that's a very important first step that we're already on the way of.
Yeah, well, that's good. I know that there's a lot more attention that needs to be really paid to that age group, but then also, yes, the non-English, non-Native Hawaiian speaking families. And we know, there are the Micronesian communities that come here for very specific reasons because of what's been going on in their islands. So they're here now, so that's great. We welcome them, but then what? They're here, but then what?
Exactly.
That's one of my biggest questions. That's great. What's next? That was nice that happened. How are we now providing a better path towards sustainability for that entity, for that group? So I think those are important factors. So, okay. In your opinion, how are our kids doing in school?
I think our kids are actually, they're doing better starting off in preschool. Our preschool program by our Department of Education is actually now recognized nationally. So there's a sort of state of preschools that gets published every year, and now that our program is in there are 10 standards by which you get judged, and we've met 8 of those standards. So while we have a small preschool, it's a highly effective preschool.
Well, yeah, I mean that could make some sense because as we know, number of students per teacher is an impact.
Right.
And we like that when we go to daycares. When our children have gone through daycares, we like it when there's 4 or 5 at most per teacher.
Right.
This way, they're getting a lot of engagement, and a lot of interaction, which is exactly how they learn. So
And it talks about the training as well, that they're, because our teachers, they're all one, we have one school district in the whole state, and so the standards are on a state level. Our teachers, are required to have bachelor's degrees. So those are the kinds of standards that make a difference.
Sure. How do we rank nationally?
We rank, our children rank 24 over, in a scale of obviously of 50 of the 50 states. So we're kind of like in the middle with respect to socioeconomic, education, et cetera. We're kind of right there in the middle.
What things can be done to improve that?
So
A
definitely,
lot of the work you're doing, but what's some of the targets?
well, definitely some of the targets that we need to address are, our homeless families, right? So some of the things that are included in that ranking is, how many children live in a very crowded housing, how many children live in households where there may be one or more unemployed person, et cetera, and those affect our numbers as well. So we see that, and that's culminated, for instance, in our homeless program.
Sure. So, okay, as the community, as if you're a parent, not a parent, if you're just a member of the community and you recognize kids need help, how can people get involved?
Well, they definitely contact us, and you can go to our website and you can send a message there. We're at hawaii-can.org, or you can call us at 531-5502. We are actually also out in the community and canvassing the community about what do you see on the ground level that we need to be addressing, because we're here to amplify the voices of the people. We're not here to talk about our own agenda.
Right.
We're doing a massive grassroots movement, and it takes every single person to get in touch with us and let us know what are the things that your community needs.
Well, I would like to invite you to neighborhood board meetings. I would like to invite you to other community meetings to make sure that there's opportunity for a conversation, maybe with some people you haven't reached.
Absolutely.
So I think that would be one great way as well for all of us, when we know we've got a grouping of people together that we meet with, to make sure that we can invite the Hawaii Children's Action
Please
Network.
do.
So that'd be great. So unfortunately, our time is up. I thank you so much for the time. I would love to have you come back.
Thank you.
Maybe yourself as well as with Deb Zeisman. Would be great to have her as well, to talk a bit more about what you're doing and what paths we can take to help us learn more. So thank you again, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. This is Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm your host, Carl Campagna. Today we had Miss Angie Mercado of the Hawaii Children's Action Network. Next week we're going to have Myron B. Thompson of the Myron B. Thompson Academy. We're going to learn about charter schools next week. So thank you to the staff and the crew of Think Tech Hawaii, and we'll see you next week. Take care.